How's everyone doing? Thank you for tuning in. And thank you to those of you who watched my last video. That was fun. See the last video get some more views, some comments. So I appreciate the interaction. Cato, Cato appreciates that as well. So as you saw the thumbnail for this one, stop ignoring the update. I was at the gym and I was between sets, and I'm usually listening to music, possibly playing a little air guitar. I turned around and I just noticed one of the big screens they have that's usually just showing their like advertisements for their classes, their yoga, like hot yoga and all that stuff. And so this is something I see there sometimes, where basically what had happened is the little update thing pops up. Windows has got an update, and whatever the options are, like install now, schedule later, ignore, snooze. And I thought about that, like, okay, this pops up and kind of gets in the way of what you were doing, right? Like when we get an update, your phone pops up offering an update, or your computer does. You're usually in the middle of something. You're usually working on something, so it's we'll just say, for all intents and purposes, the update's an improvement. Sometimes I know with computers it's not. But we'll just for the sake of the analogy, for the sake of the conversation, that we'll say that the update's usually a good thing. So why do we ignore it, right? So we're busy, we're enjoying something, we're trying to be productive, we're working on something. We don't want to take the however long it's going to take, a few minutes to stop what we're doing. And I think what's honestly probably the hardest part is set your phone down or walk away from your computer, not do something for a minute. So we all know what that is like. You reschedule the update, you ignore the update until finally your computer just makes you do it, right? So I thought about this in a metaphor, as far as, like, think of it as the universe. Whether you're spiritual, you want to talk about that being God or a higher power, or the universe or life, your higher, like the higher version of yourself, the more enlightened version of yourself, is kind of saying, hey, we've been running on the same operating system for a while. There's been a lot going on. It's time to grow a little. We need a little bit of an update. And we do the same thing with those updates that we do with the updates on our computer, but that's the snooze, push this away, ignore this. I don't want to take the time to do this. Obviously, a little harder, um, because I think our update pop-ups are not so obvious, like a one on Windows or your phone or your Apple computer um, might have. It's not very clear. I think our updates, the pop up for our updates, come in the sign of a breakup, losing a job, maybe your depression's gotten worse, your anxiety's gotten worse, you've become distant in your relationships, you're just feeling numb, things you used to enjoy, just you don't enjoy anymore. Those, I would say, are likely our pop ups coming up saying, hey, time for an update, time for an update. And we ignore those prompts for the same reasons we would ignore the prompts like on our computer, right? We don't want to take the time to slow down and listen. And listen meaning, if I go back to why mindfulness is such a thing now, because we've completely forgotten how to slow down. That when we learn to slow down, it's a lot more than just giving our nervous system a rest. Is we get a chance to listen to ourselves. We get a chance for some clarity. We get a chance to get more in touch with what we're actually feeling, rather than being on the productivity rabbit wheel. If you're familiar with Gabor Mate, absolutely phenomenal in understanding and articulating and teaching others about the impacts of childhood trauma, or just trauma in general, and how we cope with that, how we develop lives to cope with that. And he has a quote, says, in talking about being addicted to productivity, where we call it discipline, but it's often just avoidance dressed up as success. And that feels really accurate. I know that felt accurate for me for a long time. There's my worth, for one, was just in how productive I could be, how much I could get done. And I definitely recognized with myself and with a lot of my clients I've been working with in my private practice the last couple of years, this feeling like, so what I noticed was I generally like things like movies or TV shows, and um, I had a really hard time just sitting down to watch a TV show. And I'm not talking about like the usual, you get a plate of food, you put on Netflix, and by the time you found something, your food's done and you're just kind of bored and you want to do something else. It takes you a minute to find a show that you like. It was worse than that, though. I noticed if I sat down for a minute to watch a show, it was more of this, like, I felt like I was betraying humanity in some way, or betraying my own self. I wasn't being productive. I need to spend my time doing something else. We've just become so hyper productive, which to a degree, of course, there's value in that, right? I also think our society as a whole, we are overdoing it. And this is where like the quote unquote update is trying to install, is trying to, our nervous systems, aka operating systems, are basically pleading with us through increased signs and symptoms of burnout to say, will you please slow down? And for whatever reason, be it the advancements of technology and social media and having phones and just being able to be super productive, has made us think we just have to keep doing that more and more. And our nervous systems are just not keeping up, nor should they. Carl Jung, if you're familiar with his work, he often talks about your shadow. So kind of the darker unmet needs side of yourself. That tends to show up through, in this case, like burnout and irritability and emotional distance and being emotionally numb and distant in our relationships, including the relationships with ourselves. Essentially, these signs are showing up as like the pop-up asking for an update, telling you to update is getting louder. It's getting louder. And I bet some of you can relate to this. I know in my life, when I've started to pick up on things in my life that needed attention or needed to change and I ignored that, it didn't just go away. It's like the pop-up that keeps coming back up. Ready to install the update, ready to install the update. Well, the way life works and the way growth works is that update pop-up is going to get louder, and I would argue from a human perspective more painful, more obvious. It's going to get your attention over time, whether you want it to or not. And essentially your system will crash if it has to. You'll hit some sort of what might feel like a rock bottom, could actually be a rock bottom. But essentially this update is going to get your attention until it forces you into letting it install. Like those of us that have had that happen, right? I've done this a million times where I'm like snoozing this update, snoozing it. Totally forget that that's there. I've just snoozed it so much out of habit. And then I've got to work on something really important and I'm in a hurry and I restart my computer. And those of you that have done this know what happens. It boots up and it starts doing the update without your approval, without you saying yes to it. And you have to sit there and wait that out. And I think in life, this is exactly what happens when we continue to ignore the prompts to change and the prompts to grow, the prompts to try something different. Eventually, life will force the issue, and it generally does not do it in a very polite, calm way. So, reason I got thinking about that is, okay, install the update. What does that mean, right? So, it's going to be different for everybody. And as I mentioned in my last video, with how chaotic the world's feeling right now, where the message always is come back to what you can focus on, find your inner peace. And that is slowing back down. And that's hard because that's so vague and that's going to be different for everybody. And I also think we need to remind ourselves it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be difficult in terms of this super elaborate plan that I've got to find and put together, and I've got to listen to all these specific podcasts and audiobooks to tell me exactly how to do this. Now, I'm not knocking that. I love those. Clearly, I've created a YouTube channel to share so people will listen. So I definitely value that. There's also an element of you don't have to overthink it. So when I think of some of the benefits you're going to have from maybe starting there, right? Before I let this update install and I stop ignoring these signs and I try to do some inner work and I try to slow down. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, for one, you're going to feel less anxious. You're going to feel less stressed. You're going to feel more present in your relationships. You're going to feel more mental clarity in your personal life, in your creative life, in your relationships at work. There will be a sense of feeling more grounded, more in control of yourself. And I think most importantly, if you're using this as a sense to grow, is I'm a big believer in your gut being your intuition on what you need, what's lacking in your life, what you need more of, what you need to work on. And if we are constantly in our fight or flight, if we are constantly in this, having a million tabs open in our mental browser and our nervous system is just shot, you cannot hear those messages. You cannot hear your inner self. You cannot hear your gut talking to you, your intuition talking to you. It's completely drowned out. When you decide to slow down, when you decide to be purposeful with your time and do things slower and take space to be bored, to do nothing, things get quiet. And not necessarily just noise levels like decibels around you. In here gets quieter. And when that gets quiet, your intuition, your gut, your heart can then start to talk to you and tell you what they need and what they want. I think for a lot of us, that starts with our nervous systems are just asking for you to even just do that, just slow down, which just starts to build the relationship with yourself, because we've been so lost with this mask on of our value and our worth being what we can consume, what we can buy, what we can create, how much we can do at work, what we can achieve. We've completely lost sight of listening to what's going on in here. And I just think that starts really small. And here's what's ironic about this is when you start talking to people about slowing down and they get the idea, then we're like in a hurry to try slowing down. It's like, that's not what you need to do. This is slow and steady. This is not being in a hurry. And it's just finding small ways to do that during your day. An example might be most of us, what happens when our alarm goes off, right? We roll over, if you don't snooze it 34 times like me and have like a whole screen of, I'm going to wake up at 6:10, at 6:15, at 6:18, at 6:20, your many alarms. When you finally do go through that whole train of alarms and you finally wake up, don't grab your phone right away. Even if you feel like you're running late, even if you feel like you're in a hurry, this is the exact mindset you want to get out of, is constantly being in hurries. It's going to feel really uncomfortable, but maybe I'll sit there and I'll breathe for a minute before I grab my phone, before I get out of bed. I'm going to lay here and just feel. The whole point is to just feel, not judge the feeling, not run from the feeling, but just feel. When I get up and I shower, some people will have music while they're showering. Maybe you don't put any music on. Maybe you just listen to the shower. You just listen to the shower and breathe the steam in. And even if you don't listen to music while you're in the shower, you don't have anything going, just that. I'm not going to think of, I've got to hurry and shower as fast as I can so I can get ready. It's like, no, I'm going to take the time that I need and I'm going to slow down and actually try to enjoy the shower. Like, just notice the sensation of the water on me. Maybe when I wake up, if I usually will make coffee, and while the Keurig or the coffee maker is going, I get my phone out and I'm doing this, or I'm getting food ready. Purposely just taking maybe a minute while the coffee is getting ready to just sit there and listen to it and just wait for a minute and not be in a hurry to have to do something. If I'm walking somewhere and I notice myself walking quickly, slow down a little bit. I don't have to be there as fast as I think I have to be there. Most things that we think are urgent are just not. They're just not. And it's the mentality we've really got to get out of, that everything's pressing, everything is urgent, and that everything, we've got to multitask all the time. If you have a partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, kids, dog, sit there and be really present with the people around you in a conversation. Like, I'm gonna purposely try not to think about all these other things. I'm just gonna listen. I'm not gonna get my phone out. Like with my dogs, if I'm sitting there and I'm on my phone and one of them jumps up on the couch for attention, for a long time it would just be, I'll sit there and pet them while I do this, and I'm just making my brain do too much at once and be used to that, but also just really not paying attention to an animal that I love. And so I've taken that prompt as when they jump up on the couch, it doesn't, what's on my phone is not that important, and it's not pressing. I might be talking to somebody important, but that text message or the email I'm looking at is not that important. I can set the phone down for a couple of minutes and just, with both hands, or just looking at my dog and talking to them, petting them, like just being really present and doing that, like with your children, with people you love. I'm really going to take the time to just sit and be present with them, right? If I'm at work and I catch myself multitasking with a bunch of things, I might pause and just say, hey, what's the most important thing that's urgent that I'm working on right now? And I'm just going to focus on that. I don't need to be in a hurry. I'm just going to focus on it. Like, just finding these little ways just to slow down, because you will start to notice, even though those shifts maybe all feel small, that all starts to add up, and your nervous system will appreciate it, and it will start to respond in kind. You will start to notice feeling more calm. You will start to notice feeling like you can control more on your immediate bubble and your immediate life, and you don't have to worry so much about everything that's going on. That is ultimately what most of us, if not all of us, need right now, is to detach from things like social media, detach from things like being on our phones all the time, watching the news all the time, and just being on this hamster wheel that's going faster and faster and faster and faster, realizing you can just get off the hamster wheel. You can just go slow. You don't have to be on this all the time. Here's another thing you will probably notice. If you take time to slow down and not be productive with everything, you'll probably get more done, actually, and you will do more quality work on all the things that you're working on. This will give you a chance to actually do a quality job on things instead of spreading yourself out between how many countless things that and I'm guilty of this too, for sure. I've got to get all this stuff done, so I'm going to work on all of it at once, where all of it just suffers. You can't put your attention into all of it. And this includes, most importantly, you and your relationships and the people around you and the things that matter to you. You give yourself the gift of presence when you choose to slow down. You give yourself the gift of reconnecting with yourself and those around you and the things that matter to you. And once you start to slow down, and once your nervous system there's a little bit of a lag behind it. It will come though. You will notice feeling more calm, and purpose will come back. Meaning will start to come back. The amount of energy and meaningfulness that you get out of your relationships will start to come back. So it's just slowing down, because we are on this race. We're in this race that doesn't exist. We have convinced ourselves, or we have allowed ourselves to be convinced that there is this race going on. And if we get to whatever point, we'll be good. And I think we're realizing that point doesn't exist. It's like, I got to learn to be good now. I got to learn. And good meaning, even when it's hard, I feel that. I don't need to feel happy. I don't need to feel good all the time. It's not even possible. I just need to be better at feeling. I said this in a I think it was the last video, but a quote that has stuck with me that is just ultimate truth is, life is not about feeling good. Life is about being good at feeling. And when you get good at not ignoring those hard emotions, those uncomfortable emotions, the challenging emotions, and notice I didn't call them negative, because they're not negative. They're just as functional as all the good emotions. When you get good at feeling all of it, that's where peace comes from, because you trust yourself to feel all of it. We all trust ourselves to feel the good things. That's easy, right? When you get good at letting yourself feel all the things, the good times feel even better. They come more often. And what you might call the bad times or the hard emotions will still come and go. You notice you don't stay stuck in them as long. It doesn't go as deep. You're not there. It's not your permanent address anymore. This is just the weather that pops up for a moment, and I allow it, and I navigate it, and it passes. and there's even lessons in there, and I appreciate the hard weather that shows up. So I just encourage you, don't be hard on yourself for where you're at. Don't be hard on yourself for the fact that you can't slow down. This is everybody. I can tell you, client after client after client that I meet with, people that I talk with in my personal life, this is this story everyone is telling right now. Just feeling like you need to be doing more and feeling guilty for not doing more and just having a hard time sitting with hard emotions and just wanting to run from that. So the obstacle is the way. The hard emotions, the times you don't want to sit, are the times you need to just sit, find out what works for you. But we just need to get back to being able to let ourselves feel, because there is a lot of wisdom that comes from that. See you guys later.